I didn't realize a life could fracture in a single sentence. It happened on a Thursday evening, under warm lighting and polite laughter, with the smell of rosemary and butter still lingering in the air. I had spent the entire afternoon cooking roasted lamb, garlic potatoes, and the lemon cake my grandchildren loved. I remember smoothing my dress before sitting down, feeling a quiet kind of pride. These dinners used to mean something. They used to mean family. Then Laura looked at me from across the table and said, calmly, almost casually, "You really don't know when to stop taking, do you?" The words didn't land all at once. They seeped in, slow and cold, like water through a crack. The room fell silent. My son, Daniel, sat beside her. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. Just kept his eyes fixed on his plate, as if something there required urgent study. I felt every pair of eyes shift. My grandchildren, confused. Laura, steady and unflinching. Daniel, absent. "I'm sorry," I asked, because that's what you say when your world tilts but hasn't fallen yet. Laura gave a small, humorless smile. "I mean, you show up, you help, you insert yourself into everything. It's exhausting, Evelyn. We need space. You're not the center of this family." The irony almost made me laugh. Not the center. After years of babysitting during emergencies, covering bills when Daniel's business struggled, putting off my own medical treatments so they could renovate their house. Not the center. I glanced at Daniel again, waiting, hoping, begging, silently. Say something. Defend me. Correct her. Even a small protest would have been enough. He shifted slightly, lifted his glass, and drank. That was his answer. I felt something inside me go very still. "I see," I said quietly. No one stopped me as I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. My hands didn't shake. I noticed that oddly. I thought they would. "Evelyn, don't be dramatic," Laura added, already reaching for the serving spoon. I stood. "Grandma," little Sophie whispered. I bent down and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, committing it to memory as if I were about to leave for a long journey. "I'll see you soon," I told her. I wasn't sure if that was true. Daniel finally spoke. "Mom." But it came too late. The word hung there, hollow and unfinished. I walked out. The drive home felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold through a fogged window. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. Not yet. When I reached my house, a modest, quiet place I had moved into after Thomas passed, I sat in the car for a long time. 3 years without him. 3 years of learning how to exist in silence. And yet, somehow, tonight felt lonelier than the day I buried my husband. When I finally stepped inside, the house greeted me with stillness.
No laughter. No clinking glasses.
No voices layered over one another. Just the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. I closed the door and leaned against it. And then, slowly, I slid to the floor. The tears came without warning. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, unstoppable. How did it come to this? I whispered into the empty room. I thought about everything I had given, every sacrifice I had quietly made, never keeping score because that's what love is supposed to be, isn't it? Not transactional, not conditional. But somewhere along the way, I had become convenient, useful, and then, apparently, burdensome. The phone rang later that evening. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again. I let it go. When I finally checked, there were 3 voicemails. My sister, asking how dinner went. My neighbor, inviting me to a weekend market. And Daniel. His message was short. "Hey,
Mom,
I'm sorry about earlier. Laura's just stressed. You know how things are. Call me when you can." I stared at the phone for a long time.
Not a single word about what she said.
Not a single acknowledgement of how he had sat there in silence. Just an explanation. I deleted the message. That night, I couldn't sleep. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Thomas. He was standing in our old kitchen, the one we had spent decades in, leaning against the counter with that familiar look, half amused, half concerned. "You always give too much," he said. I woke up before I could answer. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. Routine has a way of pretending everything is normal. I watered the plants, opened the windows, paid a few bills, even caught myself humming at one point, which startled me. By afternoon, I was in the backyard, pulling weeds from the small garden I had started last spring. It was quiet, peaceful, safe, until I heard a car door slam. I looked up. Laura was walking toward my house. Fast. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. Her posture was tense, her movements sharp and uneven. Her hair, usually immaculate, was pulled back hastily, and her face was streaked with tears. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my hands. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not concern. Not exactly. Something colder. Something cautious. She didn't belong here like this. Not after last night. She reached the door and knocked, once, twice, then harder. For a moment, I considered not answering, just letting her stand there, just letting her feel what it's like to be shut out. But habits built over a lifetime don't disappear overnight. I walked to the front and opened the door. "Evelyn," she began, and then she broke.
Completely.
"I need help," she said through sobs. I didn't move, didn't step aside, didn't invite her in. "What happened?" I asked. She held up her phone with shaking hands. "He's gone," she whispered. "Daniel's gone." My breath caught. "What do you mean gone?"
He left.
"This morning. Just left. Took money, too. Everything from our account. He texted me and said not to look for him." The world shifted again. But this time I didn't fall with it. I just stood there, watching her. The woman who had torn me apart the night before now stood on my doorstep, desperate and unraveling. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I have nowhere else to go." And there it was.
Need.
Not apology. Not regret.
Need.
I studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside.
"Come in," I said.
Laura stepped inside like someone entering a place she didn't deserve to be, though I wasn't sure if that awareness came from guilt or desperation. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor, too loud for the quiet of my house. I closed the door behind her and walked past without looking back, heading straight into the kitchen. Routine again, kettle, cups, tea. It gave my hands something to do while my mind tried to catch up with everything that had just shifted. She sat down without being asked, dropping her bag beside the chair like it suddenly weighed too much. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The kettle began to hum, low and steady, filling the silence. I glanced at her briefly, mascara smeared, eyes swollen, the carefully curated version of her gone. It was the first time I had ever seen her look human. "When did he leave?" asked, keeping my voice neutral. "This morning," she said, staring at the table. "I woke up and he was gone. No note, nothing. Just that message." She swallowed. "And the money?" I poured hot water into 2 cups. "How much?" "All of it," she whispered. "Savings. Checking. Everything." I handed her the tea and took a seat across from her, studying her face more carefully now. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. Panic, not just about Daniel, but about what came next. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "At my mother's," she said quickly. I told her I had errands. I didn't know where else to go. Of course, she didn't go to her mother.
Pride.
Appearances. Image had always mattered to Laura more than truth. "And you came here?" I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, gripping the cup like it was the only stable thing left in her world. "I need help, Evelyn."
Just for a little while.
"Until I figure things out." There it was again.
Need.
I leaned back slightly, letting the words settle between us. "That's a lot to ask after last night." Her eyes flickered with something, shame, maybe. "I didn't mean what I said."
No.
I tilted my head slightly, because it sounded practiced. "That's not fair," she snapped, then immediately softened. "I was stressed. Things haven't been good between me and Daniel for a while. You're always there, always involved. It feels like I can't breathe sometimes." "So you decided to humiliate me?" I asked calmly. She didn't answer. The silence stretched. I took a sip of my tea, letting it cool in my mouth before swallowing. "What exactly do you need, Laura?" She hesitated, then said it plainly.
Money.
"And a place to stay, just for a couple of weeks." I almost smiled. The irony was almost poetic. "You called me a burden," I said softly. "And now you need me to carry you." She flinched. "I know how this looks," she said quickly. "But this isn't about me. It's about the kids. They need stability." And there it was, the one argument she knew I couldn't ignore.
Sophie.
Lucas. My grandchildren. I closed my eyes briefly, picturing their faces. Innocent. Unaware of the chaos unraveling around them. When I opened them again, my decision was already made. "You can stay," I said. Relief flooded her face instantly, almost painfully obvious. "But," I added, and her expression tightened again, "this is temporary. You'll find a job. You'll find a place. And you will not treat this house like a hotel." "Of course," she said quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes." I nodded once. "Good." There was a pause, then I added, "And there's something else." She looked up, wary. "I need access to Daniel's financial records. All of them." Her reaction was immediate, a flicker of hesitation. I don't know if I can." "You can," I said firmly. "If you expect my help, I expect honesty. Full honesty." She looked away, thinking, calculating. Finally, she nodded. "He keeps everything in his home office. I can get the documents when I go back."
Do that, I said.
3 days later, my house no longer felt like mine. Toys covered the living room. A cartoon played loudly on the television. Laughter echoed through the halls, bright, chaotic, alive. Sophie and Lucas brought energy I hadn't realized I missed. And yet, beneath it all, there was tension. Laura moved through the house like a guest who expected to be served, not someone rebuilding her life. She spent hours on her phone, pacing, whispering, scrolling. No job searches. No plans. Just waiting. Waiting for something to fix itself. It wouldn't. That evening, she handed me a folder without meeting my eyes. "These are the papers." I took them quietly. "Thank you." I waited until the house was asleep before opening it. The kitchen table became my workspace. Papers spread out, glasses perched low on my nose, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound. At first, it looked normal. Statements, reports, investment summaries. Then I saw it. A withdrawal.
Large.
Unfamiliar. I frowned, flipping to the next page. Another one. And another. My heart began to beat faster, louder in the stillness. This wasn't random. It was consistent. Deliberate. I pulled more documents from the folder, cross-checking dates, accounts, transfers. The pattern became undeniable. Money, my money, from the business Thomas and I had built from nothing, had been moving quietly, steadily, into accounts I didn't recognize. For over 2 years. I sat back slowly.
No, I whispered.
But the evidence didn't care about disbelief. It was all there.
Clear. Precise.
Betrayal, documented in black and white. Daniel, my son. He hadn't just left his family. He had been stealing from me.
For years.
I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. The pain wasn't sharp, it was heavy.
Crushing.
Like something fundamental inside me had cracked. I thought back to every time he handled the finances. Every time he reassured me. Every time I trusted him without question. And suddenly I saw it differently.
Not care. Control.
I looked toward the hallway, where my grandchildren slept peacefully, unaware that their father had not only abandoned them, but had been dismantling their future piece by piece. A strange calm settled over me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something colder.
Clarity.
The woman who had walked out of that dinner days ago, hurt, humiliated, unsure, that woman would have cried. This woman didn't. This woman gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and locked them away. Tomorrow I would find Daniel. And this time, I wouldn't be asking questions gently. I would be demanding answers. Finding Daniel was easier than I expected, which somehow made everything worse. A man who truly wanted to disappear wouldn't park his car in plain sight or stay somewhere familiar. But Daniel had never been good at thinking beyond the moment, beyond what was convenient, what felt easier. I made one phone call to an old acquaintance who owned a row of rental cabins by the lake, and within minutes I had my answer. He was there. Needed time, apparently. Time, as if time was some kind of shield against consequences. The drive felt longer than it actually was. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my mind replayed everything I had discovered the night before. The withdrawals, the deception, the years I had trusted him blindly. I tried to remember the boy he had been, the child who used to run into my arms after school, who once cried because he thought he'd disappointed me over something small. Somewhere between then and now, that boy had become someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe I had simply refused to see clearly. The cabins came into view through a line of tall trees, quiet and almost picturesque, like something out of a travel brochure. It made me angrier. This wasn't a place for reflection. This was a place to hide. His car was parked outside one of the units, and beside it, a sleek, unfamiliar vehicle. Red. Expensive. Of course. I stepped out of my car and walked straight to the door. I didn't hesitate when I knocked.
Once. Twice.
Harder the third time. It took a while before the door opened. Daniel stood there, blinking as if the daylight hurt his eyes. He looked disheveled, unshaven, hair unkempt, wearing a robe in the middle of the afternoon. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the numbers. "Mom," he said, stunned. "How did you?" "You didn't try very hard," I replied, stepping past him before he could react. The cabin smelled like alcohol and perfume. Not subtle, not hidden, careless. My gaze swept the room quickly, taking in the details: a glass on the table, a woman's bag tossed onto a chair, a silk scarf draped over the couch. "Where is she?" I asked. "Who?" he said too quickly. I turned to look at him fully. "Don't insult me." A door down the hallway opened slightly, and a woman appeared, younger than I expected, confident, even in that awkward moment.
She froze when she saw me.
"I'll give you some space," she murmured, disappearing again just as quickly. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks exactly like what it is," I said, setting my purse down and pulling out the folder. "But that's not why I'm here." His eyes shifted the moment he saw the papers. Recognition.
Fear. Good.
I spread the documents across the table, each page placed carefully, deliberately. "Explain this." He didn't speak at first. just stared. I'm waiting, I said. You weren't supposed to find out, he muttered. I actually laughed then, a short, humorless sound. That's your defense? He sighed, shoulders dropping as if the fight had already left him. I was going to fix it. I had a plan. How much? I asked, cutting him off. Silence. How much, Daniel? Around 300,000. The number settled between us like something physical. 300,000. I felt it then, not just betrayal, but something deeper. Disbelief. As if my mind couldn't fully accept that the person standing in front of me was the same child I had raised.
Why?
I asked quietly. He hesitated. Investments. Some went bad, and things got out of control. Things, I repeated. He gestured vaguely around the cabin, toward the hallway, toward the life he had constructed behind my back. Expenses. The house, the lifestyle. Laura. Don't, I said sharply. Do not put this on her. You made these choices. His expression hardened slightly. You wouldn't have even noticed. You have more money than you know what to do with. You live like you're still struggling. That was it. That was the moment something inside me shifted completely. That struggling, I said slowly, is what built everything you've been taking from. Your father and I sacrificed for years so that you wouldn't have to. And you repaid that by stealing from us. I was going to pay it back, he insisted. From what? I asked. More lies? He didn't answer. I gathered the papers, my movements calm now, controlled. Do you know where your children are? He flinched slightly. Laura told me they're with her mother. They're with me, I said. His head snapped up. What? She came to me. The woman you left with nothing. He ran a hand over his face. I needed to get out. You don't understand what it's been like. No, I said evenly. I don't understand abandoning your family and draining their accounts.
His jaw tightened.
We were already over. Me and Laura. For months. She didn't seem to know that, I replied. He hesitated again, then said something that made my stomach turn. It was her idea. I stared at him.
What?
The tension. Pushing you away. Making you step back from everything. He looked down. She thought if you were less involved, I could take over the business without complications. The room felt suddenly smaller. And the money? I asked. He didn't look up. That was both of us. I closed my eyes briefly. It all clicked. The coldness. The comments. The slow distancing. It hadn't been random. It had been planned. When I opened my eyes again, I felt different. Not shocked anymore. Not even angry in the way I expected.
Clear.
You don't get to be part of that business anymore, I said. He nodded slightly, as if he had already expected it. I figured. And you will repay every dollar. I will, he said quickly. I swear. Swearing isn't enough. I know. There was a long pause. Mom, he started. I raised a hand.
No. You don't get to call me that right now.
That landed. Good. I picked up my purse. You've done enough damage. To your family.
To me.
What you do next is up to you. But understand this. Things are not going back to the way they were. I walked to the door, but stopped before opening it. One more thing, I said without turning. Your children still need a father. Whether you deserve to be one is something you'll have to prove. I didn't wait for his response. I stepped outside into the fresh air, closing the door behind me with a quiet finality. The drive back felt different. Heavier, but also clearer. I had spent years believing that love meant endurance. That being a good mother meant forgiving, supporting, absorbing. But somewhere along the way, I had confused love with surrender. That ended now. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Laura through the window, moving around my kitchen like she belonged there. For the first time, I didn't feel obligated. I felt in control. I stepped inside, set my purse down, and looked at her directly. "I saw Daniel," I said. Her face went pale, and I realized something important. For the first time since all of this began, I wasn't the one on unstable ground anymore. Laura froze the moment I said I had seen Daniel. It wasn't just surprise, it was calculation. I could almost see her mind moving, rearranging facts, preparing responses, deciding what version of the truth might still work in her favor. But something had shifted in me, and for once, I wasn't interested in playing along. "Where is he?" she asked quickly, her voice tight. "At the lake cabins," I replied, removing my coat slowly, deliberately. "Comfortable, not exactly hiding." She exhaled sharply, pacing once across the kitchen before turning back to me. "And what did he say?" "The truth," I said. That single word landed harder than anything else I could have said. Her posture stiffened. "And you believe him?" "I believe the documents," I answered. "And I believe that both of you have been lying to me for years." Her expression changed instantly. The vulnerability she had shown days ago disappeared, replaced by something colder, sharper, defensive. "You don't understand," she said, crossing her arms. "You've always had control. Over everything. Over Daniel. Over the business. Over this family. We were just trying to build something of our own." "By stealing?" I asked calmly. "It wasn't stealing," she snapped. It was taking money that wasn't yours," I interrupted. "Without my knowledge. That is stealing." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension in the room was thick, pressing. "The children are outside," I said finally, nodding toward the backyard. "Which means we can speak honestly." Her eyes narrowed slightly.
Fine.
"You want honesty? You've always made Daniel feel small. Like he could never live up to your expectations. You and your perfect little life, your perfect business, your perfect control over everything." I let her finish. Then I said quietly, "And your solution was to manipulate him into betraying his own family?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "I didn't force him," she said. "He made his own choices." "Yes," I agreed.
He did.
"And so did you." The silence that followed was different now. Not chaotic. Not emotional.
Clear.
"I'm going to explain what happens next," I said, my voice steady. "And you're going to listen carefully." She didn't respond, but she didn't interrupt either. "You and the children can stay here for 3 weeks," I continued. "That gives you time to find a job and arrange somewhere else to live." Her head snapped up. 3 weeks? That's not enough time. "It's more than you gave me at that dinner table," I replied evenly. "That's not the same thing." "It is to me." She took a step forward. "I have no income, no access to money. You expect me to just fix everything in 3 weeks." "I expect you to start," I said. "Not wait. Not depend. Start." Her frustration broke through then. "You're being cruel." I almost laughed. "No," I said quietly. "I'm being fair. There's a difference." She shook her head, pacing again. "And what about the house? The company?" Daniel said. "The company is mine," I said firmly. "It always has been. And now it will remain that way." "And the house?" she pressed. "From what I've seen, it's heavily mortgaged," I replied. "You may want to consider selling it before the bank makes that decision for you." She stared at me, disbelief and anger mixing in her expression. "You're just going to let everything fall apart?" "No," I said. "I'm refusing to hold together something built on lies." That silenced her. I took a breath, then added, There's one more thing. She looked up, wary. I've already spoken to my lawyer. That got her attention. We're securing the business, the accounts, everything. Daniel will repay what he took. Legally. With interest. Her face drained of color. You're going to ruin him. No, I said calmly. He did that himself. I'm just making sure he takes responsibility. And me? She asked, quieter now. You, I said, meeting her eyes, are responsible for your own choices. For a moment, something flickered there, fear, maybe, or realization. Then it hardened again. You think you're better than us, she said.
No, y replía.
I think I finally see clearly. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet again for the first time all day. The weight of everything pressed in, but it didn't overwhelm me the way it once would have. Instead, it felt grounding. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in far too long. Evelyn. Harold's voice came through, warm and familiar. It's been a while. It has, I said. I need your help. Over the next hour, I told him everything. Not just the facts, but the pattern, the years, the realization of how deeply I had been deceived. He listened without interrupting, asking questions only when necessary. They took advantage of your trust, he said finally. Yes, I replied. They did. And what do you want to do about it? I didn't hesitate. Protect what's left. And make sure it never happens again. The following days moved quickly. Meetings, documents, changes, access revoked, accounts secured, ownership clarified. Every step felt like reclaiming something that had been quietly taken from me. For the first time in years, I was fully involved again, not as someone relying on others, but as someone in control. Laura watched all of this unfold with growing unease. Her usual confidence had faded, replaced by something uncertain. She made a few attempts to push back, to argue, to regain some footing, but each time, she found no opening. The dynamic had changed. Completely. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. I need more time, she said. You have 3 weeks, I replied. That's not realistic. I've already found you an apartment, I said, sliding a paper across the counter. She blinked, surprised.
What?
It's paid through the end of the year, I continued. That gives you stability. The rest is up to you. She stared at the address, confusion replacing anger. Why would you do that? I met her gaze. Not for you. She didn't need me to explain further. For the children, she said quietly. Yes. She swallowed, her grip tightening on the paper. I don't understand you. You don't have to, I replied. You just have to move forward. For once, she didn't argue. The day they left came faster than I expected. Boxes lined the hallway, the sound of movement filling the house as Laura packed the last of their things. The children moved more slowly, sensing the shift even if they didn't fully understand it. I knelt down to hug them, holding them a little longer than usual. You can visit any time, I told them softly. Promise? Sophie asked. I promise. Laura stood by the door, watching. When everything was loaded, she turned to me, hesitating. Thank you, she said finally. It wasn't warm. It wasn't emotional. But it was real. I nodded. Take care of them. She didn't respond, just gave a small nod before turning away. And then they were gone. The house fell silent again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking out at the quiet street, the sunlight stretching across the pavement. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I wasn't bracing. I wasn't adjusting myself to fit someone else's expectations. I was simply standing, on my own terms, And that, I realized, was something no one could take from me again. When Daniel called, I almost didn't answer. His name lit up my phone late in the evening, just as I was settling into the quiet that had become familiar again. For a moment, I let it ring, watching the screen as if it might disappear on its own. A part of me still reacted instinctively, mother first, everything else second. But that instinct no longer controlled me the way it used to. Now, there was space between feeling and action. I answered on the last ring. Evelyn. His voice sounded different. Not just tired, stripped down, uncertain. Can we meet? I didn't agree immediately. Silence stretched just long enough for him to feel it. Public place, I said finally. Tomorrow. Noon. He exhaled, almost like relief. Okay. Thank you. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, I arrived early. The cafe was small, quiet, the kind of place where conversations stayed contained and unnoticed. I chose a table near the window, more out of habit than preference, and ordered coffee I didn't intend to drink. When Daniel walked in, I noticed the change immediately. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but real. He looked thinner, his posture less rigid, as if something heavy had been removed, but not without leaving marks. His clothes were simple, worn in a way that suggested practicality rather than carelessness. There was no performance in him now, just restraint. He saw me and hesitated for a fraction of a second before walking over. Hi, he said. I nodded.
Seat.
He did, placing an envelope on the table between us before saying anything else. I didn't want to come empty-handed, he said.
I didn't touch it yet.
Talk first, I replied. He nodded, folding his hands together like he needed to keep them still. I've been working, he said. Construction. It's not what I used to do, but it's honest. I studied his face as he spoke. There was no defensiveness in him now. No excuses forming behind his eyes. That's a start, I said. I'm also in therapy, he added quickly. Twice a week. I raised an eyebrow slightly. And what have you learned? He gave a small, almost self-aware smile. That I've spent most of my life trying to prove I was enough, and when I felt like I wasn't, I made choices to cover it instead of facing it. I didn't respond right away. He continued, quieter now. That doesn't excuse anything. I know that. No, I said. It doesn't. He nodded. We sat in silence for a moment before he pushed the envelope slightly closer to me. It's a repayment plan, he said. Everything I took, with interest, legally binding. I had it reviewed. I opened it slowly, scanning the contents. It was thorough, structured.
Real.
You've spoken to a lawyer, I said. Yes. Good. I placed the papers back inside, keeping my expression neutral, though something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but recognition. Effort. That doesn't erase what you did, I said. I know, he replied immediately. I don't expect it to. His honesty was disarming. And Laura? I asked. He exhaled. We're getting divorced. I held his gaze. And the children? They're with her, he said. I see them, but supervised. She doesn't trust me. Can you blame her? No, he said quietly. That mattered. More than anything he could have promised. I miss them, he added, his voice tightening slightly. I miss everything I didn't appreciate when I had it. I watched him carefully. People say things like that all the time when they lose something. The difference is whether they change afterward. What do you want from me? I asked. He hesitated, then said honestly, a chance. Not now. Not immediately. But eventually. I want to earn back your trust. I didn't soften. You don't get to ask for that, I said. You earn it.
Slowly.
Without expecting anything in return. He nodded. I understand. And understand this. I continued. If you lie again, even once, there is no second chance. I won't, he said. I held his gaze. Don't promise, I said. Prove it. He swallowed, then nodded again. I will. When we stood to leave, he hesitated near the door. Can I, he started, then stopped. Can I hug you? The question caught me off guard, not because of what it was, but because of how he asked it. Carefully, like he didn't assume the right. I considered it for a moment. Then I stepped forward. The hug was brief, awkward, but real, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically improve. There was no sudden return to normal, no easy reconciliation, but there was movement. Steady, consistent. Daniel kept his word. Payments began arriving exactly as outlined.
No dilas. No excuses.
He showed up for his children regularly, slowly rebuilding something fragile but important. Laura, to my surprise, changed too. Not dramatically, but noticeably. She enrolled in courses, started looking for work. The sharpness in her softened slightly, replaced by something more grounded. We weren't close. We would never be. But we learned to exist in the same space without conflict. And for the first time, it wasn't forced. It was chosen. As for me, I stopped living in reaction. For so long, my life had been shaped around others, what they needed, what they expected, what they took. Even my kindness had become something people assumed rather than appreciated. That changed. I reconnected with people I had drifted away from, said yes to things I had always postponed, joined a small art class on a whim, something I had once loved but never prioritized. It felt unfamiliar at first, then freeing. I wasn't filling time. I was building something for myself. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by sketches and half-finished paintings, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Emma has a recital next week. She asked if you'd come. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, I'll be there. That night, as I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street, I realized something important. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean restoring everything to what it was. Some things, once broken, don't return in the same form. But that doesn't mean nothing can grow in their place. What we had now wasn't the same family. It was something new. Something more honest. Less comfortable, perhaps, but real. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. A year later, I stood in a room filled with strangers studying pieces of my life. The community hall was warm, softly lit, the walls lined with paintings, some bold, some hesitant, some clearly created by hands still learning how to trust themselves. Mine were among them, landscapes mostly, quiet places, sunlight through trees, reflections on water, a garden corner caught in early morning light. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but honest. That mattered more now than anything else. You have a remarkable sense of calm in your work, a voice said behind me. I turned to see Martin, the art instructor who had convinced me, gently but persistently, that I wasn't too late to start again. His presence had become something steady in my life. Not overwhelming, not demanding, just consistent. Or maybe I just like quiet, I replied. He smiled. That too. I glanced around the room again, feeling a strange mix of vulnerability and pride. These paintings weren't just images, they were proof. Proof that I had stepped outside of the version of myself I had lived in for so long. The one who waited, who endured, who adjusted. Are you ready for tonight? He asked. My family is coming, I said. That feels like enough of an event on its own. He chuckled softly. Families usually are. They arrived together, which I hadn't expected. Emma ran toward me first, her energy unchanged, bright and unstoppable. "Grandma, these are yours?" she asked, already pointing at one of the paintings. "They are," I said, smiling as I hugged her. "They're amazing," she declared with complete certainty. Lucas followed, slightly more reserved but just as curious. "Did you really make all of them?" "I did," I said. "And I'll teach you if you want." He nodded immediately. Behind them, Daniel approached more slowly. There was still a carefulness in him, like he was always aware of the space between us, but it was different now. Not avoidance. Respect. "They're incredible," he said. "I mean that." "I know," I replied simply. And I did. Sincerity had replaced performance in him, and that made all the difference. Laura stood a little further back, observing quietly. She had changed in ways that were subtle but undeniable. The sharp edges that once defined her had softened, not disappeared, but balanced by something else. Experience, perhaps, or consequence. "You captured them well," she said, nodding toward a painting of the children near a lake. "You see things clearly." I met her gaze. "I've learned to." She nodded, accepting that for what it was. Not an apology, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The evening passed in a blur of conversations, quiet compliments, and unexpected connections. 3 of my paintings sold before I even fully processed what was happening. It wasn't about the money. It was about the realization that something I created, something deeply personal, had value beyond my own understanding of it. For so long, I had measured worth through usefulness, through what I could give, fix, support. Now I was seeing something different, worth that came from simply being, from creating, from existing without needing to justify it. Later, as the room began to empty, Daniel helped me pack up the remaining pieces. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, something that would have felt impossible a year ago. "I sold a house," he said suddenly. I glanced at him. "How does that feel?" He shrugged slightly. "Like closing a chapter one should have never opened in the first place." "That's honest," I said. "I'm trying to be," he replied. I studied him for a moment. The man standing beside me wasn't the same one I had confronted in that cabin. There were still traces of him, regret, consequence, but they no longer defined him completely. "Consistency matters more than intention," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's what I'm working on." And he was. Not perfectly, but genuinely. Outside, the air was cool, the kind of quiet night that feels like a pause rather than an ending. Emma and Lucas ran ahead toward the car, laughing about something only they fully understood. Laura followed, calling after them to slow down. Kate stood nearby, talking to Martin, her laughter easy and familiar. She caught my eye and smiled, a look that said more than words ever could. "You're different," she had told me months ago. She was right, but not in the way people usually mean. I wasn't harder. I wasn't colder. I was clearer. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts. The question lingered in the air between us. A year ago, I wouldn't have known how to answer that. Happiness had been tied to everything outside of me, family harmony, stability, approval. Now it felt different. "Yes," I said finally. "I am." He nodded, absorbing that. "I'm getting there," he said quietly. "You will," I replied, "if you keep choosing the right things when it's difficult." He gave a small, thoughtful nod. That night, when I returned home, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I moved through the room slowly, not out of habit, but awareness. Everything here was mine, not just physically, but emotionally. Nothing felt taken, borrowed, or controlled. I paused in front of the mirror in the hallway. Gray hair, lines that hadn't been there years ago, hands that carried the story of time. But my posture was different. My eyes were different. Stronger. Steadier. I wasn't trying to hold everything together anymore. I was simply standing. The next morning, I woke early, as I often did now. The sunlight filtered softly through the windows, casting gentle shadows across the floor. I made coffee and stepped outside, carrying it with me to the small space I had turned into a studio. A blank canvas waited. Not intimidating. Inviting. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma.
Good morning, Grandma.
I can't wait for Sunday. Love you. I smiled, typing back a quick reply before setting the phone aside. Then I picked up my brush. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at the canvas. A year ago, I had walked out of a room where I was made to feel small, unwanted, expendable. I thought that moment had broken me, but it hadn't. It had revealed me. The version of myself I had ignored for years. The one who didn't need approval to exist, who didn't measure her worth by how much she gave, who didn't stay where she wasn't respected. That version had always been there. I just hadn't chosen her. Until now. I dipped the brush into color and made the first stroke. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was mine.